My boss tore up my contract laughing, but when he read what was written on it, he fainted. Rebecca Harrison watched in silence as her boss of 15 years destroyed what she believed was her professional life. The man laughed with cruel satisfaction, tossing the paper shreds into the air like confetti at a private celebration. That was when he noticed there was something handwritten on the back of the fragments, slowly falling to the floor. The smile vanished from Richard Sterling's face as he recognized his own handwriting in notes he thought he had destroyed long ago. Rebecca remained motionless, watching the exact moment he understood the magnitude of the mistake he had just made. "What is this?" he muttered, crouching down to gather the pieces with trembling hands. "Those are your notes on the fake contracts for Keystone Construction, Mr. Sterling," Rebecca replied, her voice calm despite her racing heart. "The ones you asked me to falsify 2 years ago." Richard's face went pale instantly. He knew exactly what she was talking about. For years he had siphoned funds meant for a housing project for low-income families in Newark, in Greater New York. What he didn't know was that Rebecca had kept every piece of evidence, every document, every proof of his wrongdoing. You can't have kept that," he stammered, still holding the fragments. "I didn't keep it, Mr. Sterling. I documented everything. Every dollar diverted, every altered contract, every family left without a home, because you needed one more offshore account." Rebecca had worked as an executive secretary at Sterling Construction since she was 22. Now, at 37, she knew every secret of that family firm that presented itself publicly as one of the most reputable in the state. For years, she turned a blind eye to minor irregularities, believing they were just shady shortcuts to speed up bureaucratic processes. Everything changed when Richard began pressuring employees to falsify documents related to the Willow Creek housing project. The development was supposed to provide affordable homes for 300 families who had been waiting 5 years on the municipal housing program's list. The funding was secured, coming from a partnership between City Hall and private investors, but Richard had found a loophole. By marginally altering the plans and using cheaper materials, he managed to siphon nearly 40% of the funds into personal accounts. The houses would still be delivered, but at a far lower quality than promised. Entire families would receive properties that would start showing structural problems within a few years. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Rebecca discovered the scheme by accident. One morning she arrived at the office early and found Richard on the phone discussing amounts that didn't match the official budgets. At first she thought it was a mistake, but when he asked her to alter dates on already signed contracts, her suspicions were confirmed. "Rebecca, I need you to change the date on this contract from August to September," he had said 3 months earlier, handing her a document. "It's just a technical adjustment." "But Mr. Sterling, this contract was already filed with City Hall with the August date," she replied, examining the paper. "Exactly. That's why I need you to figure something out. Use your creativity." At that moment, Rebecca understood this wasn't a technical adjustment. Richard was manipulating dates to justify delays that were, in reality, caused by the diversion of materials to other private projects. He sold the cement and steel meant for affordable housing to competing construction companies, pocketing extra money while families waited. The first time she refused to falsify a document, Richard was surprised. For 15 years, Rebecca had never questioned his orders. She was the perfect employee, discreet, efficient, and seemingly submissive. "Are you sure you don't want to cooperate, Rebecca?" he asked in a tone that mixed disappointment and threat. "I thought we were a team." "We are a team, Mr. Sterling. But I can't do this." "Think it over. You have a daughter in college, don't you? And your mother needs those expensive arthritis medications. It would be a shame if you lost your job right now." Rebecca felt a knot in her stomach. Richard knew her financial situation because she had always been transparent about her struggles. Chloe, her 20-year-old daughter, was studying law at an expensive private university. Her mother, Martha, 68 years old, depended on imported medications that cost almost $1,000 a month. Rebecca's salary was enough to cover those expenses, but any interruption would be devastating. For weeks she was torn between financial pressure and her conscience. Richard gradually increased the pressure, asking for small favors she knew were wrong. A document here, a date there, an altered amount somewhere else. Every time she hesitated, he reminded her of her financial responsibilities. It was Martha who, unaware of the situation, gave the advice that would change everything. "Honey, your father always used to say something," the elderly woman commented during a Sunday lunch. "He used to say there's no point in having money for medicine if you lose the health of your soul. I'd rather feel pain in my body than see you suffering because of wrong choices." Rebecca looked at her mother, who had worked as a housekeeper for 40 years to support the family with dignity. Martha never had the opportunity to study, but she possessed a wisdom no university can teach. In that moment, Rebecca decided she would not be an accomplice to Richard's crimes. The following Monday, when he asked her to alter yet another contract, she refused once and for all. "I'm not going to do this, Mr. Sterling, and you know you shouldn't be asking me." "Getting moralistic now, Rebecca, after 15 years?" He shot back, irritated. "No, sir. I'm just doing what I should have done all along." It was at that moment that Richard decided to get rid of her, but Rebecca had already anticipated that possibility. During the weeks of pressure, she secretly photographed documents, recorded phone conversations she had witnessed, and wrote down every irregularity she had seen. More importantly, she discovered where Richard kept his personal notes about the missing funds. He had a habit of scribbling calculations and observations in the margins and on the backs of official documents. He thought no one paid attention, but Rebecca had always been observant. She noticed that he often wrote the actual amounts next to the official ones, as if he needed to remember the difference. One afternoon, when Richard left for a meeting, Rebecca gained access to his personal files. There she found dozens of documents with his handwritten notes, detailing exactly how the corruption scheme worked. She photographed everything with her phone and later printed copies at a neighborhood print shop. But Rebecca went further. She discovered that Richard had made notes on the back of her own employment contract. Probably out of distraction, he had used the document as scratch paper during a phone conversation about diverted funds. The notes were right there, in his own handwriting, with amounts, dates, and even bank account names. Knowing that her boss would likely try to fire her to get rid of an inconvenient witness, Rebecca prepared a plan. She made a copy of her contract with Richard's notes on the back and kept the original in a safe place. When he finally decided to tear it up in front of her, as a gesture of power and humiliation, he didn't know he was destroying the copy. Now, watching Richard kneeling on the floor, trying to piece together the fragments like a desperate puzzle, Rebecca felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction at finally having concrete evidence against him. Sadness at seeing a man she once respected, revealing himself to be so small and cruel. "Where's the original?" he asked, his voice hoarse with desperation. "Safe, along with everything else I've documented about your business." Richard stood up slowly, his face red with anger and panic. "You don't know who you're messing with, Rebecca. I can destroy your professional life in New York City. No one will hire you." "Maybe so, Mr. Sterling, but at least I'll sleep soundly knowing I did the right thing." It was then that the office door opened and Victoria Sterling walked in, Richard's daughter and the company's lawyer. She had arrived for a meeting about a new project and found her father on the floor picking up papers, and Rebecca standing with a determined expression. "Dad, what's going on here?" asked Victoria, taking in the strange scene. Richard tried to compose himself quickly. "Nothing much, sweetheart. Just sorting out an employment matter with Rebecca." But Rebecca decided it was time for the truth to come out. "Victoria, your father just tore up my employment contract because I refused to falsify documents for the Willow Creek project." "What?" Victoria looked from her father to Rebecca, confused. "What's this about falsifying documents?" "Victoria, don't listen to her. She's making things up because she got fired," said Richard, but his voice didn't sound convincing. Rebecca took a deep breath. Victoria had always been different from her father. She had graduated from Columbia University with a law degree and had returned to work at the family business with ideals of modernizing it and making operations more transparent. Rebecca had witnessed several arguments between father and daughter about ethical business practices. "Victoria, I have proof that your father embezzled funds from the housing project. He altered contracts, used cheaper materials, and transferred the money to personal accounts overseas." "That's a lie," shouted Richard. "You don't have any proof." Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed some of the photos she had taken. "I have documents, recordings, and even his handwritten notes, including on the back of my own contract, which he just tore up, thinking he was humiliating me." Victoria took the phone and examined the images. Her face gradually changed as she recognized her father's handwriting and the amounts that didn't match the official budgets she knew about. "Dad, is this true?" she asked, her voice trembling. Richard tried one last move. "Sweetheart, are you going to believe a bitter employee or your own father?" "I'm going to believe the evidence," replied Victoria, handing the phone back to Rebecca. "And from what I've seen here, we have a very serious problem." Richard's phone rang at that moment. It was his wife, Elizabeth. "Richard, I need to talk to you urgently." A strange letter arrived in the mail. "Not now, Elizabeth. I'm busy. It's about irregularities at the company. It says you should get in touch with a certain Rebecca Harrison if you want to understand more." Rebecca smiled discreetly. She had sent an anonymous letter to Elizabeth 3 days earlier, knowing she would eventually need support from someone in the family. Elizabeth had always been a sensible woman, and unlike her husband, had genuine social concern. "I'm coming over right now," said Elizabeth, hanging up the phone. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing." Richard was cornered. His daughter had seen the evidence, his wife was on her way, and Rebecca had documents that could destroy not only his career, but also his freedom. He sat down heavily in the chair, running his hands over his face. "What do you want, Rebecca?" he asked, defeated. "Justice, Mr. Sterling. The families of Willow Creek deserve the houses that were promised to them, with the quality that was promised. And if I agree to do that, will you forget everything? It's not just about building the houses right now, it's about repairing the damage already done and making sure this never happens again." Victoria intervened. "Rebecca, do you have a lawyer?" "No, I don't have money for that. I'll represent you for free and I'll make sure my father is held accountable for everything he's done." "Victoria!" protested Richard. "You're my daughter." "That's exactly why I'm going to do the right thing. I won't let our family's name be tarnished even further by your actions." Elizabeth arrived 20 minutes later, accompanied by James Miller, the company's accountant for 10 years. She had called him on the way, asking him to bring the accounting records from the last 2 years. "Richard, we need to talk," said Elizabeth, entering the office with determination. James Miller greeted everyone discreetly and placed a folder on the table. "Mrs. Elizabeth asked me to review some accounts. I found some discrepancies that need to be clarified." Rebecca watched Richard grow even paler. James was an honest and competent man. If he had found discrepancies, it was because there really were problems in the numbers. "What kind of discrepancies?" asked Victoria. "Money withdrawals that don't match the registered projects, materials purchased that never arrived at the construction sites, payments to companies that never provided services." Elizabeth looked at her husband with an expression Rebecca had never seen before. It was a mix of disappointment, anger, and determination. "Richard, how long has this been going on?" "Elizabeth, I can explain." "How long?" she repeated more firmly. "A few years," he muttered. "How many years?" Richard didn't answer. It was James who spoke. "Based on the records I've reviewed, at least 5 years. Maybe more." Elizabeth closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the information. When she opened them again, Rebecca saw a transformed woman. "Rebecca, please sit down. We need to talk." Rebecca sat down, still holding her phone with the evidence. "First, I apologize on behalf of the Sterling family for what my husband did to you and to those families. Second, I need to understand exactly what happened so we can resolve this in the best possible way." During the next hour, Rebecca reported everything, from the initial pressures to falsify documents to the discovery of the complete scheme. She showed the photos, explained how she had documented everything, and detailed the impact the diversions would have on the beneficiary families. Elizabeth asked pointed questions, always focusing on the human aspects of the situation. Victoria took notes, already thinking about the legal aspects. James checked the numbers presented by Rebecca against the official records. Richard remained silent, visibly defeated. "Rebecca, you're right," said Elizabeth after hearing everything. "I can't allow our company to cause this kind of harm to people. I want you to know that we're going to fix it." "How?" asked Rebecca. "First, your job is guaranteed. In fact, I want to promote you to Quality and Ethics Supervisor. Your role will be to ensure nothing like this ever happens again." "Mrs. Elizabeth, second, we're going to use our personal resources to fix the problems in the houses that have already been delivered. Each family will receive a house with the quality originally promised." "But that will cost a fortune," protested Richard. "It doesn't matter. It's our responsibility. And if we don't have enough money in the company, we'll sell personal assets." Victoria agreed with her mother. "Rebecca, I also want you to help me implement new internal controls. We need systems that prevent this kind of thing in the future." Rebecca felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. She had prepared for the worst possible scenario and instead was being promoted and gaining powerful allies. "There's something I don't understand," said Leo, examining some papers. "How did you find out about the overseas accounts, Rebecca?" "I overheard a phone conversation by chance. Mr. Sterling was discussing transfers with someone and mentioned account numbers." "Richard," said Elizabeth, staring fixedly at her husband, "how many accounts do you have that I don't know about?" Richard hesitated before answering. "3. "And how much money is in those accounts?" "Elizabeth, this is complicated." "How much money?" she insisted. "Approximately $2 million. The silence that followed was heavy. Rebecca mentally calculated that this amount would be enough to completely resolve the problems with the housing project and still have money left over for additional improvements. "That money is coming back to the United States immediately," Elizabeth declared, "and it's going to be used to repair the damage caused to the families." "Elizabeth, you don't understand. If I bring that money back, questions will come up. I could be in serious trouble." "You're already in serious trouble, Richard. The question now is how we're going to minimize it," Victoria interjected. "Dad, as a lawyer, I can guarantee you that cooperating is your best option. If this reaches the appropriate authorities without you having taken corrective measures, your consequences will be much worse." Rebecca watched the family falling apart and rebuilding itself before her eyes. Elizabeth, who had always seemed like a submissive wife, was showing impressive strength. Victoria, whom Rebecca had watched grow up since she was a teenager, was proving to be an ethical and determined professional. And Richard, the man she had feared for years, was looking small and frightened. "Rebecca," said Elizabeth, "there's something I need to know. Why didn't you report this to the authorities immediately?" Rebecca thought before answering. "Because I wanted to give things a chance to be resolved internally first. These families need homes, not scandals that could delay the project even further." "That shows your wisdom," Elizabeth commented, "and your genuine concern for the people affected." James Miller, who had remained quiet during the family conversation, finally spoke. "Mrs. Elizabeth, if you'll allow me, I have a suggestion. We can structure the regularization so that it's transparent to the oversight agencies, but that prioritizes the correct completion of the housing project." "What do you mean?" Victoria asked. "We can voluntarily report the irregularities, along with a correction plan that's already been implemented. That demonstrates good faith and usually results in lesser penalties." Elizabeth looked at Rebecca. "What do you think?" "I think it makes sense. What matters is that the families receive what was promised." "Then that's what we're going to do," Elizabeth decided. "Leo, prepare all the necessary documentation. Victoria, you'll represent us legally. Rebecca, you'll personally supervise the correction of each identified problem." "And me?" Richard asked. "You're going to step away from the company's operations until everything is resolved," Elizabeth answered. And you're going to start therapy to understand how we got to this point. Therapy? Yes. If we're going to rebuild our family and our company, I need to understand why you made these choices, and you need to understand as well. Rebecca admired the way Elizabeth was handling the situation. Instead of simply punishing or seeking revenge, she was focused on constructive solutions. The phone on the desk rang. It was Martha, Rebecca's mother. "Sweetheart, sorry to bother you at work, but I got a strange call. A woman saying you were in trouble and that I should go over there." Rebecca closed her eyes. Richard had called her mother, trying one last psychological pressure tactic. "Mom, everything's fine. Actually, everything is much better than I expected." "Are you sure?" The woman sounded very worried. "I'm sure. I'll tell you everything when I get home tonight." When Rebecca hung up, Richard avoided her gaze. He knew she had discovered his attempt to manipulate her through family. "Richard," said Elizabeth, who had overheard the conversation, "did you call Rebecca's mother trying to pressure her?" I thought—" "You thought what? That intimidating a 68-year-old woman would solve anything?" Rebecca watched Elizabeth stand up and walk to the window, watching the street activity below. When she turned around again, her eyes were welling up, but her voice remained steady. "Rebecca, I want you to know that my husband's behavior does not represent the values I tried to teach my children, and it won't happen again. Mrs. Elizabeth, you don't need to say anything. I just want you to know that from now on, you have the full support of the Sterling family to do whatever is necessary to fix this situation." Victoria stood up and extended her hand to Rebecca. "Rebecca, welcome to the new Sterling Construction, a company that will do business with integrity. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the following weeks, Rebecca experienced a complete transformation in her professional life. Her new position as quality and ethics supervisor came with a significantly higher salary, and more importantly, real authority to implement changes. Her first task was to visit the Willow Creek housing complex to personally assess the problems. Accompanied by Victoria and a team of engineers, Rebecca spoke with every family that had already received their homes. Mrs. Dorothy Dawson, 72 years old, was the first resident they met. She had moved into her new home 3 months earlier, but was already dealing with leaks in the kitchen and cracks in the bedroom wall. "Sweetheart, at first I thought it was normal," she said, offering coffee to the visitors. "A new house sometimes has these little problems, right? But when the neighbor mentioned hers was the same way, I started to get worried." Rebecca explained that they were there to fix all the problems at no cost to the residents. "Really?" asked Mrs. Dorothy suspiciously. "This isn't a prank, is it?" "It's not a prank. It's our obligation to deliver the home as promised." Victoria added, "Mrs. Dorothy, you'll receive a written document guaranteeing that all repairs will be done with top-quality materials, and if any problem comes up in the next 5 years, we'll resolve it free of charge." The elderly woman began to cry. "You don't know what this means to me. I've rented my whole life. This little house is the first place that's truly mine." Rebecca felt a lump in her throat. It was for people like Mrs. Dorothy that she had decided to stand up to Richard. The next stop was at the home of David and Susan Harrison, a young couple with 2 small children. They had received the keys just a month earlier, but had already identified problems with the electrical and plumbing systems. "The kitchen sink clogs every week," Susan explained, "and there's an outlet in the kids' bedroom that gives shocks." Rebecca wrote everything down carefully. The engineer accompanying them confirmed that these were serious problems that could cause accidents. "We're going to replace the entire electrical and plumbing system," said Rebecca, "and while the repairs are being made, the family will stay at a nearby hotel, all expenses paid." David and Susan looked at each other in disbelief. "But why?" David asked. "No one has ever done anything like this for people like us." "Because you deserve a safe, well-built home," Victoria replied, "and because it's our responsibility." Throughout the day, Rebecca and the team visited 23 families. Every home had similar problems: poor quality materials, shoddy workmanship, structural issues that could get worse over time. With each visit, Rebecca felt her determination to do things right growing stronger. At the end of the day, when they returned to the office, Elizabeth was waiting with more news. "Rebecca, I spoke with the mayor today. I explained our situation and our corrective plan. He was impressed by our initiative and offered the City Hall's support to speed up the necessary bureaucratic processes." "That's great," Rebecca said. "How long do we estimate it will take to fix all the problems?" "With the City Hall's support and working double shifts, we can get everything resolved in 3 months, the chief engineer replied. "And how much will it cost?" Victoria asked. James Miller, who had spent the day redoing the calculations, presented the numbers. Approximately $1,400,000. That includes top-quality materials, specialized labor, and temporary lodging for the families during the repairs. Elizabeth sighed, but didn't hesitate. "Draw up the budget. The money in the overseas accounts will comfortably cover these costs." Rebecca admired Elizabeth's determination. In just a few weeks, she had transformed from a submissive wife into a decisive business leader. "Mrs. Elizabeth, may I ask you a personal question?" Rebecca said. "Of course." "How are you handling all of this emotionally? Finding out that your husband—" Elizabeth interrupted with a gentle gesture. "Rebecca, marriage is a complicated thing. Richard isn't a bad person, but he lost his way at some point. Now my priority is to rebuild our company and our family on a foundation of solid values." "And Mr. Sterling, how is he reacting to the changes?" "Richard is adapting. He started therapy this week. It's still too early to know how it will go, but I'm willing to give him a chance to become the man I always believed he could be," Victoria added. "Rebecca, my father has always been a good provider and, deep down, has a good heart. But financial success kind of distorted his priorities. Maybe this crisis is exactly what he needed to rethink his life." Rebecca reflected on those words. She had only seen Richard as a villain over the past few months, but maybe the situation was more complex than she had imagined. That night, when Rebecca got home, she found her mother preparing dinner in the small kitchen. "Mom, I need to tell you something important that happened at work." Martha stopped stirring the beans and sat down at the table, giving her daughter her full attention. Rebecca told her everything. Richard's pressure, her refusal to falsify documents, the plan to document the irregularities, and the turn of events from the day before. "So you got promoted?" Martha asked. "I did, and with a much better salary. And those poor families are going to get better homes. They are, all of them." Martha smiled and held her daughter's hands. "Sweetheart, I'm so proud of you. Your father would be proud too." "Mom, that's what you taught me. Doing the right thing even when it's hard." "And now, how are things going to be from here on out?" Rebecca thought before answering. "Different, very different. But better, I think." The next morning, Rebecca arrived at the office to find Richard waiting in the reception area. She hesitated for a moment, but decided to greet him normally. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling." "Rebecca, can we talk?" "In private?" She led him into a small meeting room and closed the door. "What can I do for you?" Richard seemed to have aged years in just a few weeks. His clothes, once always impeccable, were rumpled. His eyes were red, as if he hadn't slept much. "I want to apologize," he said, his voice low, "for what I did to you, to the families, to my own family." Rebecca hadn't expected that. "Thank you for saying that, Mr. Sterling." "Rebecca, you could have destroyed me completely. You could have gone straight to the police, to the press. Why didn't you?" "Because destroying things doesn't solve problems, it just creates bigger ones. I started going to therapy, like Elizabeth suggested. I'm trying to understand how I got to that point, how I let myself do those things." "And what have you discovered?" Richard sighed deeply. "That at some point I stopped seeing people as people. They just became numbers, obstacles to my financial goals. I lost my humanity." Rebecca was surprised by his sincerity. "Mr. Sterling, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you start with the embezzlement? Was it just greed, or was there something more?" Richard hesitated before answering. "At first it wasn't greed. It was fear. Fear of losing everything I had built. The construction market is very unstable. One cancelled contract, an economic crisis, and you can lose decades of work overnight. So you started setting money aside as a safety net. Exactly. But then it became an addiction. Every extra dollar I managed to divert made me feel safer, more powerful. I stopped thinking about the consequences. Rebecca realized the situation was more complex than she had imagined. Richard wasn't simply a greedy criminal. He was a man who had been consumed by fear and then by greed. Mr. Sterling, thank you for being honest with me. It helps me understand better how we got here. Rebecca, there's one thing I need to know. Can you forgive me? The question caught Rebecca off guard. She thought for a long moment before answering. Mr. Sterling, forgiveness is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But I can see you're trying to change, and that's important. I understand, and I accept that. What I can say is that I'm not angry with you. I was, but I'm not anymore. Now I just want to focus on doing things right going forward. Richard nodded, looking relieved. There's one last thing, Rebecca. Elizabeth told me you have full authority to implement changes in the company. I want you to know you have my complete support. If you need anything from me, just ask. Thank you. Actually, there is something you can do. What? I want you to help me understand exactly how the embezzlement scheme worked. Not to hurt you, but to make sure our new controls are effective against that kind of thing. Richard agreed immediately. Of course. I can put together a detailed report of everything I did wrong. It might be useful to prevent future problems. In the following days, Rebecca worked intensely on implementing the new quality and ethics controls. With Victoria's help, she created protocols that required double approval for all significant transactions, independent monthly audits, and a confidential channel for reporting misconduct. More importantly, she set up weekly visits to the construction sites, talking directly with workers, and personally checking the quality of materials and services. During one of those visits, Rebecca met Frank Sullivan, an experienced bricklayer of 58, who had been working for the company for nearly a decade. "Mrs. Harrison, can I say something?" he said, approaching her discreetly. "Of course, Frank. Go right ahead." "You know we always knew something was wrong around here, right?" "What do you mean?" "The materials that arrived here weren't the same as the ones described in the paperwork. Weaker cement, thinner rebar, thinner paint. We could see it, but we couldn't say anything." "Why couldn't you say anything?" "Because anyone who complained was let go, and everyone here has a family to support." Rebecca realized the problem was even bigger than she had imagined. It wasn't just Richard acting alone. There was an entire system that silenced the workers who could have reported the irregularities. "Frank, this won't happen anymore. I'm creating a system where any worker can report problems without fear of retaliation." "Really?" "Really. And what's more, I want you to be our quality leader here at the construction site. Your experience and honesty are exactly what we need." Frank was moved. "Mrs. Rebecca, I've worked in construction for 40 years. I never thought anyone would value what I know. Frank, experience like yours is priceless, and honesty like yours is even more valuable." Frank's promotion had an immediate effect on the construction site. The other workers realized that the new management truly valued integrity and competence, regardless of hierarchical level. Within 2 weeks, Frank identified several problems that would have gone unnoticed. Poorly executed foundations, substandard electrical installations, waterproofing issues, all were corrected before they became serious problems. Elizabeth visited the construction site to see the implemented changes in person. "Rebecca, I'm impressed with the progress. In just a few weeks, we can already see the difference in the quality of the work." "Mrs. Elizabeth, the secret is involving everyone. When workers feel valued and heard, they become our best quality inspectors." "And the families who already received houses with problems? How are the repairs progressing?" "We started this week. 5 families are already in hotels while we make the corrections to their homes. It should take about 2 weeks per house to do everything properly." "And are they satisfied with the process?" "More than satisfied. Mrs. Dorothy called me yesterday crying with happiness. She said she never imagined anyone would care so much about a simple person like her." Elizabeth smiled. Rebecca, you're transforming not only our company, but the lives of these people. That's more valuable than any financial profit. That afternoon, Rebecca received an unexpected call. It was Chloe, her daughter, calling from college. "Mum, you won't believe what happened today." "What is it, sweetheart?" "My business law professor used Sterling Construction as a positive example in class today. He said you're implementing one of the best ethical compliance programs he's ever seen." Rebecca was surprised. How did he find out about it? Apparently, the news about the self-disclosure and the voluntary remediation program spread through the academic community. The professors are using it as a case study on how to resolve corporate problems ethically. And what did you think? "Mum, I'm proud of you. All my classmates were impressed when I said my mum works there and was responsible for uncovering and solving the problems." Rebecca felt a wave of emotion. Her daughter's recognition meant more than any promotion or salary increase. "Mom, there's something else I want to tell you." "What is it?" "I decided to change my focus in the program. I want to specialize in business law and compliance. You inspired me to use the law to make a difference in people's lives." After the conversation with Chloe, Rebecca reflected on how her decision to confront Richard had created a wave of positive changes that extended far beyond the company. 2 weeks later, Rebecca was reviewing reports in her new office when Elizabeth knocked on the door. "Rebecca, there's someone here who wants to talk to you." It was Mrs. Dorothy, the first resident they had visited in Willow Creek. "Sweetheart, I came to thank you in person," the elderly woman said, her eyes welling up. "Mrs. Dorothy, you didn't have to come all the way here. How's the house?" "It's a dream, dear. They redid everything better than I ever imagined, but that's not the only reason I came." "No?" "I came because I want you to know that you changed my life. For the first time, I feel like someone cared about me as a person, not just as a number." Rebecca hugged the woman, moved. "Mrs. Dorothy, you don't know how much this means to me. And I brought something for you." Mrs. Dorothy pulled a small pot with a succulent seedling from her bag. "I planted this with soil from the backyard of my new house. I want you to have it to remind you that small seeds can become beautiful things when they're cared for with love." Rebecca accepted the gift, touched by the simplicity and symbolism of the gesture. After Mrs. Dorothy left, Elizabeth remarked, "Rebecca, what you did, it changed not only the lives of those families, but also our family. Victoria is more motivated than ever. Richard is making real progress in therapy, and I rediscovered my purpose." "What is your purpose, Mrs. Elizabeth?" "To ensure that our company is an instrument of positive transformation in the community, not just a business, but a force for good." "And Mr. Sterling, how is he reacting to all these changes?" "Better than I expected. Therapy is helping him understand the motivations behind his actions, and he's genuinely committed to change." "That's good. Real transformation takes time." "Rebecca, there's something I want to propose to you." "What is it?" "I want you to become our partner. Not just an employee, but a true business partner." Rebecca was speechless for a moment. "Mrs. Elizabeth, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept. You deserve to own part of what you're helping to build." "But I don't have the money to buy a stake in the company." "You don't need to. Your stake will be based on the value you've brought and continue to bring to the company. Your knowledge, your integrity, your vision for the future." Rebecca thought about her mother, her daughter, all the families in Willow Creek. She thought about how her life had completely changed in just a few weeks. "I accept," she said, "but with one condition." "What?" "I want us to create a fund for social projects. Part of the company's profits should always go toward helping underserved communities." Elizabeth smiled. "I accept. Actually, that's exactly the kind of thing I expected you to propose." 3 months later, Rebecca was in her office preparing a report for the monthly partners meeting when Victoria came in with important news. "Rebecca, I just got a call from the district attorney's office. They finished the investigation into our self-disclosure." "And what was the result?" "Praise. They said our handling of the case was exemplary and that it will serve as a model for other companies. There won't be any criminal charges against the company or against my father. And the administrative penalties, minimal, a symbolic fine and the obligation to maintain our new controls for at least 5 years. But we were already doing that anyway. And Mr. Sterling personally. Also a symbolic fine and community service. He's going to give lectures on business ethics to small business owners. Rebecca laughed. He's really going to give lectures on ethics? I know. The prosecutor said who better to talk about the consequences of unethical behavior than someone who experienced it firsthand. That makes sense. And how did he react? Better than we expected. He said it'll be an opportunity to turn his negative experience into something constructive. That afternoon, Rebecca visited Willow Creek to oversee the delivery of the last corrected homes. All 23 families were already in their renovated houses, and another 50 families were receiving new homes built with the new quality standards. "Rebecca!" shouted a child running toward her. It was Leo, the 7-year-old son of David and Susan Harrison. "Hi, Leo, how are you liking your new home?" "It's really cool, and the outlet in my room doesn't shock me anymore." Rebecca laughed and chatted with Susan, who walked over. "Rebecca, I don't know how to thank you. The house is perfect, even better than the houses in the wealthy neighborhoods." "Susan, that was our obligation from the start. You deserve quality, no matter your income." "You know what makes me happiest?" said Susan. "What?" "My Leo wants to be an engineer when he grows up. He spends all day drawing houses and saying he wants to build beautiful homes for people just like you did." Rebecca felt her eyes fill with tears. Seeing how her actions were inspiring the next generation was more rewarding than any professional recognition. During the ceremony for the delivery of the last homes, the mayor gave a speech praising Sterling Construction as an example of corporate social responsibility. Several other construction companies were present, interested in understanding how to implement similar programs. After the ceremony, Rebecca found Richard talking with some residents. She approached to listen to the conversation. "Mr. Richard," Mrs. Dorothy was saying, "I want you to know that I forgive what happened before. Everyone deserves a second chance." "Thank you, Mrs. Dorothy. Your words mean a lot to me. And I want you to know that I'm proud to see how you've changed. It shows that people can grow and become better." Rebecca watched Richard struggling to contain his emotions. She approached and gently touched his arm. "Mr. Sterling, how do you feel?" "Humbled and proud at the same time," he replied. "Humbled by what I did, but proud to see what we built from it." "And how's the therapy going?" "It's helping me a lot. I now understand that my problems didn't start with greed, but with fear. Fear of not being enough, fear of losing everything, fear of disappointing my family. And now? Now I understand that true success isn't how much money you have, but how many lives you touch in a positive way." Rebecca smiled. "Mr. Sterling, thank you for sharing that with me. It shows how much you've truly changed." "Rebecca, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Can you respect me again? You don't have to like me, but..." "Respect?" Rebecca thought for a moment before answering. "Mr. Sterling, respect is something built with consistent actions over time. What I can say is that your actions over the past few months show someone committed to change. That's the beginning of respect." "That's enough for me," he said, looking genuinely grateful. 6 months later, Rebecca was in Washington, D.C., attending a national conference on corporate social responsibility. She had been invited to present the Sterling Construction case as a case study in organizational transformation. During her presentation, Rebecca told the whole story, from the moment Richard tore up her contract to the implementation of the company's new social programs. "What I've learned," she said to an audience of 300 business owners and executives, "is that crisis can be opportunity. When we face our problems head-on, instead of trying to hide them, we create possibilities for transformation that benefit everyone involved." After the presentation, several business owners approached Rebecca, interested in implementing similar programs in their companies. "Rebecca," said an executive from a major telecommunications company, "your story is inspiring. But I have a practical question. How did you manage to convince the owners to invest so much money in fixing the problems?" I didn't have to convince them, Rebecca replied. When people understand the human impact of their decisions, the right choice becomes obvious. But what about the financial impact? Didn't your company suffer? Quite the opposite. Our reputation improved so much that we have more contracts than we can handle. Clients want to work with companies they trust. A businesswoman from a construction company in the South commented, Rebecca, what would you do if you faced resistance from company leadership? What if the owners didn't want to invest in fixing the problems? That's a difficult question, Rebecca admitted, but I believe there's always a way to help someone understand the value of ethics. Sometimes it's through the numbers, sometimes through emotions, sometimes through legal consequences. And if nothing worked, then it would be time to make difficult decisions about where we want to work and what kind of people we want to be. After the conference, Rebecca received dozens of invitations for consulting and speaking engagements. Her story had become a case study at several universities, and executives from across the country wanted to learn from her experience. Back in New York City, Rebecca found a surprise waiting in her office. It was a thank you letter signed by all the families of Willow Creek. Dear Rebecca, we want you to know that you didn't just change our homes, but our lives. Our children grew up seeing that there are people willing to fight for what is right. That is a lesson they will carry forever. You taught us that we deserve respect and quality, no matter our social standing. That changed how we see ourselves and our place in the world. Thank you for not giving up on us. With love and eternal gratitude, the families of Willow Creek. Rebecca read the letter 3 times, getting more emotional with each reading. She carefully stored it in her office drawer, next to the small succulent that Mrs. Dorothy had given her months earlier. That evening, during dinner with her mother and her daughter, Rebecca reflected on the extraordinary journey she had lived through. Mom, said Chloe, today the teacher mentioned that you were invited to teach at Columbia University. That's true, Rebecca confirmed. They want me to teach a course on business ethics and social responsibility. Are you going to accept? Martha asked. I think so. It would be a way to multiply the impact of the lessons we learned. I'm proud of you, sweetheart, said Martha. You took a terrible situation and turned it into something beautiful. It wasn't just me, Mom. It was the entire Sterling family willing to change. It was workers like Frank willing to tell the truth. It was the families of Willow Creek willing to forgive and give second chances. But you were the catalyst, Chloe insisted. Without your courage to face what was wrong, none of this would have happened. Rebecca smiled, thinking about how that terrible day when Richard tore up her contract had become the first day of a new life. 2 years later, Rebecca was in her office, now much larger, reflecting her new position as a partner in the company, when she received an unexpected visitor. It was James Miller, the company's former accountant, accompanied by a nervous-looking young man. Rebecca, may I introduce my nephew, Michael? He works as an accountant at a logistics company and is facing a situation similar to the one you faced 2 years ago. Rebecca invited them both to sit down. Tell me, Michael, what's going on? It's similar to what happened here, said the young man, visibly tense. My boss is forcing employees to falsify tax documents. When I refused, he threatened to fire me. And you want to know how to proceed? Yes. My uncle told me your story and said you could give me some guidance. Marina spent the next hour advising Carlos on how to document the irregularities, how to protect himself legally, and how to approach the situation constructively. The most important thing, she said, is to remember that you're not alone. There are always people willing to support those who do the right thing. But what if I lose my job? Carlos, losing a job where you're forced to be dishonest isn't a loss. It's a liberation. And in my experience, when you act with integrity, new opportunities always come your way. After Carlos and Leo left, Marina thought about how many people were facing situations similar to the one she had faced. She decided it was time to formalize her work supporting ethical whistleblowers. At the monthly partners meeting, Marina proposed the creation of the Ethics Alliance, a non-profit organization that would offer legal, psychological, and financial support to employees who reported misconduct in their companies. That's an excellent idea, said Victoria, "and it shows how our company has evolved from being the problem to being part of the solution." Mrs. Elizabeth agreed enthusiastically. "Marina, you have our full approval and financial backing for this initiative." "And what about me?" asked Richard. "Is there any way I can contribute?" "Actually, yes," Marina replied. "Your unique experience can help business leaders understand the consequences of unethical choices before it's too late." "It would be an honor to participate," said Richard. The Ethics Alliance was officially launched 6 months later, at a ceremony in the auditorium of Newark City Hall. Mrs. Dorothy was a special guest, cutting the symbolic ribbon alongside Marina. "Girl," the older woman said to Marina, "look how far we've come, from a torn-up contract to an institute that's going to help hundreds of people. Mrs. Dorothy, none of this would have been possible without the support of people like you." "Nonsense, you're the one who had the courage to do what needed to be done." During the ceremony, several officials spoke about the importance of initiatives like the Ethics Alliance. The district attorney who had handled the Sterling Construction case gave a particularly moving speech. The Sterling Construction case shows that it's possible to resolve serious corporate problems constructively, prioritizing reparation over punishment, transformation over destruction. After the ceremony, Marina received more than 50 requests for help from employees at different companies facing similar ethical dilemmas. 3 years after the day Richard tore up her contract, Marina was giving a lecture at Columbia University when a student asked a question that made her reflect deeply. "Professor Rebecca, if you could go back in time, would you change anything about how you handled the situation?" Marina thought for a long moment before answering. "You know, that's a question I ask myself often. And the answer is, maybe I would have acted sooner. Maybe I shouldn't have hesitated so long before taking a firm stand against the irregularities." "But don't you think the hesitation was important for you to fully understand the situation?" "It's possible. Maybe the time it took me to act was necessary so that I could approach the situation in a more mature and constructive way." "And today, how do you see Mr. Richard Sterling?" "I see a man who made serious mistakes, but who had the courage to acknowledge them and genuinely changed. That doesn't erase what he did, but it shows that people can transform when they face the consequences of their actions." After class, Marina walked across the Columbia University campus, reflecting on her journey. Her phone rang. It was Chloe, now a law school graduate working at the Ethics Alliance. "Mom, we just received a very important case. A female employee at a large multinational company uncovered billion-dollar irregularities. She wants our help." "Chloe, do you have enough experience to handle something of this magnitude?" "I have the best teacher in the world," Chloe replied, laughing. "And besides, I won't be alone. We have a whole team now." Rebecca smiled, proud to see her daughter following a path of integrity and social justice. "All right, but always remember, the goal isn't to destroy, it's to build something better." "I learned from the best, Mom." That night, Rebecca had dinner with her extended family, her mother Martha, her daughter Chloe, Elizabeth, Victoria, and, surprisingly, Richard. "Rebecca," Richard said during dessert, "I want to thank you once again for giving me the chance to change. I know you could have chosen a much more punitive path. Richard, thank you for seizing the opportunity. Not everyone does that." "I received an interesting call today," he mentioned. "A businessman from Chicago wants me to go there and speak to a group of executives about ethics and the consequences of bad decisions." "Are you going to accept?" Elizabeth asked. "I am. It's my way of turning my mistakes into something useful for others." Martha, who had remained quiet during the conversation, finally spoke up. "Richard, may I say something?" "Of course, Mrs. Martha. I'm proud to see how you've changed. It shows that it's never too late for a person to become better." Richard was moved by the elderly woman's words. "Thank you, Mrs. Martha. That means a lot coming from you." Rebecca watched the scene, amazed at how relationships can be rebuilt when there's honesty and genuine effort to change. 5 years after that fateful day, Rebecca was in her office reviewing the annual report for the Ethics Alliance when her secretary announced an unexpected visit. "Rebecca, there's a delegation of Japanese businessmen here. They want to learn about our work." Rebecca received the group, and through an interpreter, heard that they had come to the United States specifically to study the Sterling model for resolving corporate problems. In Japan, the delegation leader explained, we have a concept called Kaizen, which means continuous improvement. But what you've created here goes beyond that. You turned a crisis into an opportunity for deep transformation. Thank you, Rebecca replied. But I must say we didn't invent anything new. We simply applied ancient principles of honesty, responsibility and compassion in the corporate environment. Even so, the results are impressive. We'd like to document your process to teach Japanese business leaders. Rebecca agreed to collaborate, pleased to see that her work was inspiring change on an international scale. After the meeting with the Japanese delegation, Rebecca received a call from Frank Sullivan, the former bricklayer she had promoted to quality supervisor. Mrs. Rebecca, I have news to share. What is it, Frank? My daughter got into college for civil engineering. She wants to follow in your footsteps and work with ethical construction. Rebecca was moved. Frank, that's wonderful. Send her my congratulations. She said she wants to intern at our company to learn how to do construction the right way. Of course we'll accept her. It will be an honor to have her on the team. After the conversation with Frank, Rebecca reflected on how a single decision to confront what was wrong had created waves of positive impact that continued to expand years later. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story and where you're watching us from. If you have something to share with us, leave a comment with sincere words. Do you think Rebecca made the right decision in standing up to her boss? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company.